A small shard of glass embedded in the stone wall surrounding what once was an age-old synagogue of a Jewish community with a long and proud history in the German Bavarian town of Regensburg. The shard of glass, a drawing of the sanctuary, and a few faded pictures are all that remains from the night of terror known as Kristallnacht 75 years ago. Not far from the synagogue, in fact, the synagogue stands in the shadow of the Cathedral of St. Stephen. Its soaring towers, flying buttresses, and stained glass windows all survived the war. In fact, our guide told us how the citizens of the town went to extraordinary lengths of time, energy, skill, and money to save the stained glass windows from American bombing during World War II. As she spoke, I kept hearing the words of the Yom Kippur liturgy. Pains were taken to save cathedrals from destruction. Treasures of art must be preserved, ere the song of the human soul. While in the streets of Europe, mother and child lay dying, and many looked away. To look away from evil? Is this not the sin of all good people? The day after Yom Kippur found Myra and I bound for Europe in a riverboat cruise on the Danube, Rhine, and Main rivers, from Budapest to Amsterdam. For 2 weeks we traveled through the heartland of the old Austrian-Hungarian Empire, from the baths of Budapest to the romantic charm of Vienna, from timeless hamlets to cities with names of Dirmstein, Milk, Passau, Regensburg, Nuremberg, Bamberg, Würzburg, and Cologne, in the heart of German Bavaria. It's hard to believe that a mere 70 years ago this was a bloody battlefield. These were the names of German targets for American warplanes on bombing runs over dangerous enemy territory. And 5 years before that, this is where was launched the final solution. And it all began with the night of broken glass, Kristallnacht, November 9th and 10th, 1938. And yet today it is all so pristine, bucolic, and rebuilt to look like it had been this way forever. The neatly patterned countryside seemed to echo with the sound of music. Iconic, legendary castles stood guard over the Rhine. It was all so Disney-esque, so unreal, so picture-perfect. The natural beauty of Bavaria was infectiously enchanting. It was Oktoberfest, the men in their lederhosen, the women in their traditional blue and white apron dresses, the beer, the Wiener Schnitzel, and music. It all seemed so unnatural, so unreal for us to be here. But at the same time, it was all so inviting. In Vienna, amidst the art museums, is found an almost unseen small square with a broken white stone sculpture. Close by is a massive piece of stone with barbed wire wrapped around it and a sign reading, "Street Washing Jew."
In Vienna, Jews were humiliated and beaten. They were forced to scrub the streets, and Jewish homes and businesses were looted. Hundreds of Jews committed suicide, and thousands more fled. For 9-year-old Lisa Collier, growing up in Vienna, the world changed overnight.
Suddenly I couldn't go to school anymore. It was dangerous for my family, it was dangerous for me, it was dangerous for anybody Jewish. My only hope ever was to get away, get away. That was the thought.
The attacks on Jews during the Anschluss encouraged random acts of violence against Jews throughout the Reich. Next, Hermann Göring, Hitler's economics minister, issued a decree allowing the Nazi government to seize all Jewish financial assets. Tens of thousands of Jews added their names to waiting lists for emigration.
Lest we forget that the greatest robbery in European history took place in the 1930s, during which time the German Nazi state seized Jewish businesses, banks, homes, artwork, household items, heirlooms, jewelry, furs, and the like. The anti-Semitic legislation was a step-by-step approach. Hitler watched the reaction first of the Jews, then the German population, and finally the foreign countries. Hitler followed a slow progression of evil, ultimately to the extreme.
We die with a joyful heart in the knowledge of our infinite achievements and of a contribution unique in the history that bears my name. This war will not come to an end the way the Jews imagine, with the extermination of the Aryan people. Instead, it will see the complete annihilation of the Jews.
Catholic nun Sister Suzanne Nofke, president of the Sisters of St. Dominic, said in a video by the Alba House, "Christians and Jews, a troubled brotherhood." Hitler was not the first or last to decree the wearing of the badge of shame. He was not the first or last to expel Jews from public places and positions. Hitler simply carried to its insane extreme every myth history had ever concocted about the Jewish people, and every measure history had ever taken to punish, humiliate, subjugate, or exterminate them for their Judaism. The Holocaust of church-sponsored anti-Semitism of 19 centuries was repeated and summarized in one great, deliberate, systematic Holocaust in the 20th. And some Christians wonder why Jews still mourn. Pope Francis, just days before the 75th anniversary of Kristallnacht, met with a delegation of Jews, including Holocaust survivors, to discuss the continuing threats of terrorism in rogue nations like Iran. His Holiness shared concern for the 75 years after the infamous Kristallnacht pogrom, a poll commissioned by the respected Ebert Foundation, estimates that 150 million Europeans still harbor anti-Jewish sentiment. Today, Europe's Jews are facing a growing wave of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hatred unseen since World War II. As 1938 came to its close, it was time for Hitler to demonstrate to the world the Jew was a pariah nation to be destroyed. It took the least possible excuse for him to unleash the largest pogrom Europe would ever see. Arsonists set more than 700 synagogues on fire. Firemen stood next to their trucks and watched, following their orders not to intervene. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, in which a tidal wave of Nazi violence swept through Germany and Austria, leaving in its wake not only 1,000 broken glass windows of Jewish businesses, 700 burned synagogues, Jews being fined 1 billion marks, and insurance companies told not to pay them a cent. Desecrated Torahs, all this, including, and most importantly, shattered lives. To us, these events seem at best remote. Since then, our world has experienced violence of far greater magnitude. In comparison, the events of November 9th and 10th, 1938, were terrible, but seem of much less consequence. Broken glass? We've seen much worse. Perhaps 100 people killed? We know of genocides in which millions have been murdered. So why focus on Kristallnach? Kristallnach brought hope to an end. Kristallnach was not simply more of the same. That night violence knew no bounds. Police were told not to interfere unless non-Jewish property was threatened. So the policemen walked on sidewalks filled with shattered glass, being careful not to get in the way of Nazi thugs systematically breaking windows and looting Jewish stores and homes. On that night, Jews watched longtime friends and neighbors stand by and not do a thing to help. The next morning brought even more of the unthinkable, as some 30,000 men and teenagers were torn from their families and taken to Dachau and Buchenwald, concentration camps. What have they done? Nothing. Their crime? Being a Jew. A little girl hiding behind a desk in an orphanage. A young man ripped away from his home. A boy on his bicycle, frantically trying to pedal his way home, while dodging the stones hurled at him by Hitler Youth. A girl using sign language to reassure her parents that they would make it through the night. Far more than glass was shattered on Kristallnacht. What was destroyed was hope. Hope we place in one another in times of need. The hope that we will stand together. The hope that we can learn and remember. Hope we will find the courage to stand up to bigotry and hatred. Today, as we remember Kristallnacht, that night 75 years ago, we know that we can never take hope in humanity for granted. We can never see it as anyone's responsibility but our own. That is where we place our hope. For us, Kristallnacht and the Shoah is no mere act of history. Kristallnacht is rather the story of the Jew as a prisoner of hope, and we dare not forget that, as Anne Frank wrote.
It's really a wonder that I haven't dropped all my ideals, because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them, because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us too. I can feel the sufferings of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will come up right, that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. In the meantime, I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the day will come when I shall be able to carry them out.